Well, today we're beginning a new series of study. This time it's on the notion of God's instructions for His Jubilee. So we're going to be studying the Jubilee found primarily in the book of Leviticus. So we're going to start with an introduction today. So you might say, well, that's simple enough. It's just one chapter from Leviticus, chapter 25, as a matter of fact. To which I would say the answer is, well, yes and no. Yes, God's Jubilee is laid out in Leviticus 25. No, the tentacles reach into many areas of Israeli life, many purposes of God from Israel's birth to the end times. So it spans all of the time of the Bible's history and the Bible's future. Some of the considerations that we'll have to look at to give you an idea of how extensive this could be. First, God's general purpose for the Jubilee. We'll talk about that. The effect of the Jubilee on the Israeli people. What the Jubilee prohibited within the nation. Fourth, what the Jubilee was to accomplish relative to the original land allotments after the conquest of Canaan. Those allotments are found, of course, in Joshua. What happened at that original allotment and how it affected women. What were the various roles dealing with, let me leave that a little bit hanging. First of all, is with the continuation of family lines. A levirate marriage, for example, the role of the kinsman redeemer, the role of the blood avenger. That sounds a little bit bad, and it can be, but it was part of Bible history. And the role of the blood avenger. It's not simply to go after the blood of someone and kill him, although that was part of it. But there's more to the story than that. The establishment of cities of refuge. Remember that the Levites got no allotment. God said, I am your inheritance, not land. So there were cities then that were given to the Levites for their use, and that's handled a little bit differently in the Jubilee instructions. And then there's the establishment of cities of refuge, which were among the cities given to the Levites for their use. Then there's the slavery in Israel that comes up. How do you deal with the slavery under the Jubilee rules? The question of what does poverty in Israel have to do with Jubilee, or versus. Turn it around, what does Jubilee have to do with poverty? What protection is there for women in Israel? We know it is a patriarchal society, but how were women protected? In particular, what does the Jubilee have to do with women? There's Jesus and his role as Messiah even. While this was introduced in Leviticus, it extends all the way to Jesus and his role as the Messiah while he was on earth and beyond. Then we have a connection between Jubilee and end times events. Involved in that is the relationships between Jews and Gentiles, which was not good, as we all know. Then there is the involvement of the plan of redemption. In the nature of Jubilee, redemption is primary, one of the primaries, and Jubilee itself has several different uses of the idea of redemption, which means to buy back something. And those are just a few of the ideas that come to mind as we jump into our imagination when it comes to this Jubilee idea. So what is a Jubilee? Well, the short answer is it's a celebration, a commemoration, an anniversary of sorts, a festival, or it is a gala. And this does not have to be connected with Israel, but we will separate out the difference between cultural jubilee, religious jubilee, and God's jubilee. Generally, it was to be a time of joyous celebration because it was a time of release of many kinds of oppression. So the people would look forward to a jubilee. With God's jubilee, it's all of everything that's wrapped up in a cultural jubilee, plus it's a sacred time for God's people. It is a year-long time of celebration and remembrance of the way God intended things to be in Israel. A joyous time of release for several kinds of different or undesirable conditions, times of oppression for people. Think for a moment. Jubilee has the same root as jubilation or jubilant. So you know it's intended to be a pleasing, person-pleasing, God-pleasing time. Something that's very pleasant. The culture in those days often had a jubilee, and generally in those times it would be associated with the king. A new king's installation, for example, would be a time for a jubilee when the king would set forth several benefits for his people during that year. And that might be repeated every 25th year, the 50th year, 75th, and so forth. So every 25 years, there might be some kind of special celebration relative to the king, in which the king grants special privileges to his people. He generally gave them something that brought joy and a call for celebration. But God's Jubilee was even more, much, much more. It was also called the year of the Lord's favor, acceptable year of the Lord. There were several terms like that used in which the word Jubilee does not appear, but it's the same notion. It was a time of joyous celebration, but for many, many other reasons. So, let the good times roll, folks. The name Jubilee in Scripture comes from, you ready for this? Yobel, the ram's horn, or the blowing of the ram's horn. So let me read for you a couple of verses from Leviticus 25 to give you a feel for this. It says, starting in verse 8, and going to read through most of 8 through 11. You are also to count off 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself. 7 times 7 years, so that's 49 years. so that you have the time of 7 Sabbaths of years, namely 49 years, in case you couldn't do the math as I just tried to do. Says verse 9, you shall then sound a ram's horn abroad on the 10th day of the 7th month. What is that day? On the Day of Atonement. You shall sound a horn throughout all your land. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year, the one following the 7 cycles of 7 years. You shall thus consecrate the 50th year. It shall be a jubilee for you. You shall have the 50th year as a jubilee. You shall not sow, nor reap its aftergrowth, nor gather in from its untrimmed vines. In other words, your fields are to lay fallow. Your vineyards are to not be pruned, or there's no harvest, no planting, no anything. The land has the year off. By the way, in those days there was no notion of crop rotation. Those kinds of things were not issues, not understood, not done. But God says you're going to, every 50th year at least. Ram's horn was blown on the Day of Atonement of it looks like to me, the 49th year to usher in the Jubilee year. So late in the 49th year on the Day of Atonement, then the ram's horn would be blown. In some cases, that would signal the beginning of a new year too. So is it 49 or 50 years when the ram's horn is blown? I don't know. You can figure that out if you're concerned. The call ushered in a joyous year of liberation, release, emancipation, restoration, renewal. It was all about restoring and renewing. But the Jubilee had fallen out of Israel's practicing centuries before Jesus' time. We don't know really how long the Jubilee was in fact honored and recognized as God had intended. Something that went by the wayside. When you see its complexity, you might understand how that would happen. Its significance was not forgotten, however. There was yet to come an important end times role for the year of the Lord's favor, for an end times jubilee, even if it was misunderstood by most people in the nation. But first, every 7th year, there was something else. He talked about the 7-year cycle, 7 cycles of a 7-year period. Well, every 7th year was called a sabbatical year. Shemitah, Shemitah. So every 7th year, there was a sabbatical year. That means something's going to stop for the year. So let's look at the first 7 verses of Leviticus 25. So if you want to ascribe the principal verses from Scripture for this session, it would be Leviticus 25, 1 through 7. Excuse me. This goes like this. The Lord then spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai, saying, and this is God speaking to Moses, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I shall give to you. They hadn't gotten into the land nor conquered the land yet. They were still outside in the end of the wilderness wanderings. When you come into the land which I shall give you, then the land shall have a Sabbath to the Lord. Now here's the description of this cycle. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather its crop, both the crop of the field, the crop of the vineyard. So you have 6 straight years of normal agricultural effort and gather in the crops. So you can plow, sow, care for the crops, prune. Finally, you will reap a harvest for 6 years you will do that. But during the 7th year, and here's the deal, during the 7th year, the land shall have a Sabbath, a rest, a Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to Yahweh. You shall not sow your field, nor prune your vineyard. In other words, don't do any farmer's work. Don't do any vinekeeper's work. They just rest. Your harvest after growth you shall not reap. So he's saying that during the 7th year there can be volunteer crops. Well, if they are volunteer crops, fine, but you do not harvest them. And your grapes of untrimmed vines you shall not gather. So you don't gather either crops from the field or grapes from the vine. So there's no harvest. The land shall have a sabbatical year. So this land gets, from a farming perspective, gets the year off. And all of you shall have the Sabbath products. Now here's an adjustment to it. You can't harvest whatever comes up on a volunteer basis, but you can have it. For the land, the Sabbath products of the land for food for yourself and your male and female slaves and your hired man and your former foreign residents, those who live as aliens with you. So your entire family, clan, and so forth can eat of the land's produce, the volunteer produce. Even your cattle and the animals that are in your land shall have its crops to eat. So, the Jubilee year was a year following the 7th Shemitah. It followed the 7th sabbatical year, making it the 50th year of such a cycle. So there's another topic we may have to look at further. Excuse me, the Sabbath year. As a matter of fact, we'll probably do that either late this session or more likely next session. So since it was the first 7 verses of the chapter talking about the Jubilee, it's related in some ways to the Jubilee. But for now, let's begin by examining the land allotments that were made when the conquest of Canaan was more or less complete. That allotment is described, of course, in the book of Joshua. But before going there, we need to understand several things about, quote, land, end of quote. In the Abrahamic covenant, God promised to give the land of Canaan to Abram's descendants, then to Isaac's descendants, then to Jacob's descendants as an eternal possession. When the land was allotted during the time of Joshua, the permanent nature of that gift was an eternal distribution by tribe, clan, and family. No tribe was ever to lose any of its allotment, nor gain any to its allotment. In other words, you were not going to add land to that which was allotted to you. What was allotted to you stays with you permanently. The land allotments were to be permanent, eternal allotments. Why? The answer is rather simple. God says, it's mine. The land was God's gift, and he assigned it as he pleased, the tribes possessing but not owning it. So there's a difference. They say it's your land, but you don't own it. Look at Leviticus 25:23. And this is Yahweh speaking to Israel. The land which I allot shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. What's he saying? You may need to sell land at times because of your need for cash or other goods, because of some reason of poverty or situations. You may have to sell your land, but it is not a permanent sale. So what does that mean relative to buying and selling land? Something God dealt with, and so will we. That's coming up. That's part of the deal with the Jubilee. That's God's manner of dealing with his statement that the land I gave to you was a gift from me to you forever. There is the first clue as to the purpose of God's Jubilee. A major purpose of God's Jubilee was to maintain the status quo from the original land allotment, to keep things working as he originally intended. Now the allotments were made to, and this is, again, the patriarchal nature of the culture. The allotments were made to the male heads of families, and inheritance was split among the sons. So what does that mean for a family whose offspring are all girls, ladies, women, female? This is something that God dealt with, and so will we. Promises, right? In the divisions of land, 13 assignments were made, but the tribe of Levi received none. We mentioned that a little bit ago. So if that left 11 tribes, right? Well, yes and no. Who got the extra portions? If there were 13 sets of allotments and only 11 tribes getting allotments, how did that work? Well, there were actually at this time 12 tribes beyond Levi. They're Levites. Who were they? Joseph had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Both Manasseh and Ephraim received allotments. So that accounts from 11 back to 12. Well, how do you get from 12 to 13? We can answer that rather quickly. Joseph's offspring received 3 allotments. Ephraim got 1, Manasseh 2. Remember the term, the half-tribe of Manasseh? 1/2 of Manasseh received an allotment east of the Jordan River. The other half-tribe got its allotment on the west side of the Jordan. So Manasseh got 2 allotments, Ephraim got 1. That accounted for the 3 in beyond the 10 other tribes. The families and clans, and a clan is just a group of families within a given tribe. Families and clans were provided God-given protections beyond the land assignments. And as promised, we will look at those provisions. So we got a lot of things looking ahead that we're going to have to look at and study. Just a heads up, those protections for the family, and especially the women of the family, were, what were those protections? They were men within the family or clan. And a couple of terms were used for those guys. Kinsman redeemer, and that's a close to what you would call the closest of the kin, the closest kin, the closest relative. The other is named the blood avenger. So there are two names for men within the family who have responsibilities when it comes to the family, including promise of protection for the women of the family. The kinsman redeemer, blood avenger, which may be, in some cases, the same man. And it is not a static thing. It can change depending upon who is alive, who has passed. But let's back up just a bit to end this session by answering this question. What about allotments? And I've asked it just a moment ago. What about land allotments where the father's offspring are all female? Well, Scripture gives us an example of exactly that situation, that scenario, in the case of a guy named Zelophehad, Zelophehad. I always want to call it Zelophehad, but it's Zelophehad. At least that's the way I pronounce it. I'm going to go to Numbers 26 to find a reference to this. Numbers 26, verses 33 and 34. Now Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, Hepher, Heifer, whichever, had no sons, but only daughters. So how is he going to determine his inheritance? He has no firstborn son, or any son. And the names of the daughters of Zelophehad were Mahlah, Noah. It's interesting. Noah is a girl's name in this case. Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. Milcah was, I think, a fairly popular lady's name in those days. These are the families of Manasseh. So Zelophehad was of the tribe of Manasseh. Now, which tribe, I'm not sure. I think it was the half-tribe that was west of the Jordan, but I'm not positive of that. I only say that because of his description in Joshua. Zelophehad and his family were of the tribe of Manasseh, as we just read, of the half-tribe, as I said, I think, west of the Jordan. That's not critical in the issue here, but that's what I believe I recall. And now, let's go to Numbers 26, verses 1 through 11. A little bit longer passage, but this is worth looking at. We keep saying it's a patriarchal society, and the women had virtually no rights or no say. Well, that's not exactly true, but it takes a little description to get to that point. Numbers 27, the first 11 verses. Then the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. So then they, the daughters, came near, and these are the names of the daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses. So these ladies bravely came in front of Moses to make a request. And before Eleazar the priest, I think it was Eleazar, the son or grandson of Moses. I think he was the son of Moses. So this was a time after Sinai, certainly. And before the leaders and all the congregation. So these ladies stood up in front of everyone. This was a public meeting. They came in front of everyone at the doorway of the tent of meeting, saying, "Our father died in the wilderness." So Zelophehad had already died. Yet he was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against Yahweh in the company of Korah. Remember Korah's rebellion. And she's saying, our father died, but he wasn't one of those rebels. He did not rebel against Moses or the leadership. He died in his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father, why should the name Zelophehad be withdrawn from among his family because he had no son? She's saying if he doesn't get, or they were saying, if he doesn't get some kind of land allotment in his name, then his name will disappear as part of our family. So then here is their request. Give us a possession among our father's brothers. And Moses brought their case before Yahweh. Moses prayed about this. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, the daughters of Zelophehad are right in their statements. You shall surely give them a hereditary possession among their father's brothers, and you shall transfer the inheritance of their father to them. So in their father's name, the ladies would get a land allotment when Joshua distributes the land. That's what God is telling Moses. Further, you shall speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if a man dies who has no son, then you shall transfer his inheritance to his daughters. Just because there is no son does not mean there is no inheritance. It will go to his daughters. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers, so that it stays, the allotment stays within the family. And if he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. Again, keeping it within the family. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his nearest relative in his own family. It's got to stay in the family. And he shall possess it. And it shall be a statutory ordinance to the sons of Israel, just as Yahweh commanded Moses. And Joshua did exactly as God had outlined there. Let me go to Joshua 17 and read verses 3 through 6, because we're going to have something else arise that isn't in there till you start thinking about it a minute, and it seems that it was a potential problem. However, Zelophehad had the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, had no sons, only daughters. We've heard that before, right? These are the names of his daughters. We've heard this before too. Mahlah, Noah, Haglah, Milcah, Tirzah. And they came before Eleazar the priest again, and before Joshua the son of Nun. This time Moses is gone, Joshua is in charge, Eleazar is still the priest. So they go before him and before the leaders, saying, the Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers. So according to the command of Yahweh, he, Joshua, gave them, the girls, the ladies, an inheritance among their father's brothers. Verse 5, there fell 10 portions to Manasseh, besides the land of Gilead and Bashan, with those which is beyond the Jordan. There's the eastern side, because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance among his sons, and the land of Gilead belonged to the rest of the sons of Manasseh. So that still leaves it up to a question. Did they get it in Bashan, or did they get it west of the Jordan? But anyhow, Joshua made sure they got an allotment of land. But that wasn't the end of it. Let's go back to Numbers. Chapter 36 of Numbers, verses 1 through 3. And the heads of the fathers' households of the family of the sons of Gilead, you catch that, the sons of Machir, the sons of Manasseh, of the family of the sons of Joseph, came near and spoke before Moses and before the leaders. So now this is Gilead from Manasseh, whose allotment was east of the Jordan, and he's come before Moses saying, the heads of the father's household of the sons of Israel. And they said, the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land by lot to the sons of Israel as an inheritance, and my Lord, that would be Joshua, was commanded, or Moses, depending upon how you want to read it, by Yahweh, to give the inheritance of Zelophehad, our brother, to his daughters. So, what is the problem that they're raising? So, the concerns people, men from Gilead, continued. And here's verse 3. But if they, the daughters who are given an allotment, married one of the sons of the other tribes, their inheritance will be withdrawn from the inheritance of our fathers from Manasseh, and will be added to the inheritance of the tribe to which the husbands belong. Thus it will be withdrawn from our allotted inheritance. So what are they saying? Yeah, that's fine. You give the allotment to the girls. But when they marry, their husbands become the beneficiary. And so their husbands, if they're in another tribe, their husbands acquire Manasseh land as part of the land, say, of Reuben. From the land transfers from Manasseh to Reuben. That's the problem they're saying. So it wouldn't be a permanent allotment as indicated. So that has to be solved. So those that were challenging Moses from Gilead, part of the tribe of Manasseh, the ones who got the allotment again on the east side. So when I said I thought this was speaking of, the west side, I was wrong. It's the east side. So their allotment, the girls' allotment, could be dispersed among 2 or 3 other tribes if they married outside the tribe of Manasseh. So we go back to Numbers 36 again, reading from verses 5 through 12. We're spending a lot of time reading scripture here because that's where these issues have been settled. Then Moses commanded the sons of Israel. So Moses is still around. This is all before something else. So Moses commanded the sons of Israel according to the word of Yahweh, saying, the tribe of the sons of Joseph are right in their statements. This is what the Lord commanded concerning the daughters of Zelophehad, saying, let them marry whom they wished. Only Zelophehad's daughters must marry within the family of the tribe of their fathers. So what was Yahweh saying? The ladies have to marry within their own clan, within Gilead, within Manasseh. Thus no inheritance, verse 7, thus no inheritance of the sons of Israel shall be transferred from tribe to tribe. For the sons of Israel shall each hold to the inheritance of the tribe of his fathers. So saying, yes, we'll make the inheritance and give it to the daughters, but the daughters cannot marry outside their tribe. They can marry who they want as long as who they want to marry and choose to marry stays within the tribe. So, what does that mean? That means the land will stay within the tribe. It may go shifting a little bit, but it will not shift outside the tribe. Just as the Lord had commanded Moses, so the daughters of Zelophehad did. The daughters agreed to this. The daughters of Zelophehad married their uncle's sons. So they married sons of their father's brothers. They married those from the families of the sons of Manasseh. The ladies said, we agree. We'll do that. What is clear here is that God's intent was that all of the land allotments stay fixed for each tribe, and that no family, because the father had no sons, would be exempted from an allotment. Every man shall have an allotment whether he has sons or not. So we'll stop here for now, even though the case of Zelophehad's daughters didn't solve all of the problems associated with permanent land allotments. There's still the question of buying and selling land. It said, we've already seen the land cannot be sold permanently. So apparently all land sales in Israel were declared to be temporary sales. Well, there's much more to come. Sometimes it gets a little simpler, sometimes it does not get a bit